Some conversations are too interesting to stay buried. Between Two Urns is where history meets humanity, equal parts irreverent and insightful. Each episode digs up the stories, legacies, and lingering questions we leave behind. This interview-driven podcast brings you candid conversations with people whose lives, work, and passions shape the stories we carry forward in Ramsey County. From artists and educators to community leaders and unexpected voices, we explore what drives us, challenges us, and ultimately connects us. Blending humor, honesty, and a curiosity about the past and present, Between Two Urns proves that history isn't just something we inherit, it's something we live. Pull up a chair. The conversation is just getting started. Today we welcome Brian Oake to the podcast. Brian is a true Twin Cities original and a legendary voice in the local music scene. With over 25 years behind the mic, Brian has helped shape how generations of listeners discover music, spinning records and telling stories at Radio K, Rev 105, Drive 105, Cities 97, and The Current. Known for his deep knowledge and also his deep voice, sharp wit, and a genuine love for artists, he's been a constant thread in the region's creative community. In this episode, we talk about the evolution of radio, the heartbeat of local music, and the moments that made a career dedicated to sound. Hi, Brian Oake.
Hi, Youa Vang.
Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Genuinely, I enjoy your company, so I'm looking forward to this.
Same. So tell us your bio. What's your elevator pitch?
My name is Brian Oake. I grew up in Coon Rapids, Minnesota, so I'm a northern suburbs kid. Moved to Minneapolis when I was 18, and I've lived in Minneapolis ever since. I'm now 57 years old. I am a divorced father of one. My daughter is a grown woman. She's 26. She'll be 27 in just a matter of days here. I am a 30-year radio veteran of the Twin Cities on-air radio broadcasting community. Did drive time, either morning drive or afternoon drive, for 30 years. And, like anybody's career and any industry, there are ups and downs, radio being more dynamic than most. Mm-hmm. So, you bounce around a lot, but I was really, really fortunate to be able to stay in the same market for 30 years. Normally you've got to move wherever the gigs are in radio. So very fortunate in that regard. And these days I am living on my own, moved back to Uptown for the first time since the 80s. And I do a podcast, the Brian Oake Show podcast, and I work part-time at a record store. And so I'm not making speedboat money, but I'm
You're making yacht money.
Not quite. But I am at this age kind of rediscovering who Brian is, between divorce and sobriety and all these other things that have come into play. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I'm learning about myself again, and I'm finding out what 57-year-old Brian is like instead of young man Brian. And it's interesting. It's a super fun journey. I'm very happy right now with what I've put together for my life in terms of employment and the things I'm not doing anything I don't want to do, and it feels really good, Youa. It feels really good.
Good. I feel like the older I get, the more I can be like, no, I'm good.
The wonderful thing about not caring as much about what the rest of the world thinks, that's very liberating. But also you finally, you have the experience, you've put the hours in, you've done the reps, right? And so you know what serves you and what doesn't, and it gets easier to make those decisions and to make sure that you're serving that important part of yourself as you get older.
So I don't think I know how you got started in radio. Can you share that story?
I can. My voice dropped when I was very young, probably 10, 11 years old, well before puberty kicked in.
Was it this deep at 10?
Not quite this deep,
okay.
But it was very deep for a 10-year-old. And people would call the house and think I was my dad. And then at a certain point, it got this deep, and everybody would say, I had no designs of being on the radio. I loved the radio, loved listening to it, but that everybody would say, my God, you got that great voice. You got a voice for radio. You got to do radio. And it got said to me so often that I genuinely do not know, did I decide to do radio or was I just sort of coerced into it? But either way, I went to college at Winona State for 1 year, and I worked at KQAL down there. I was the music director on my freshman year, my first experience on the radio. But to me, it was just sort of a lark at that point. I didn't think this is what I'm doing for a living. I didn't honestly believe I could do it for a living. I thought, well, college radio, that's fun to do because, I was always a music head. And so
Yes.
getting to play cool music on the radio and make everyone listen to my opinions and jabber about it, it was pretty great. But I didn't assume it was anything you could do for a living. I thought you had to be like, I don't know, like an old school Hollywood entertainer type, right? Like I'm like, I can't just go on there and be myself. So years later, I had not done anything in radio for like the next 7, 8 years. I worked in the nonprofit community for the Clean Water Action Alliance on their fundraising wing for lobbying and other work they do around the state. And at that time, I started going back to school briefly, and I went to the U of M. And it was WMMR before it was Radio K. So I started working there. And that was, we all have to kind of grind and put in the hours early on in anything that we do. And I had a Sunday morning at 6 a.m. shift, and I was 23 years old. And there would be times, because at the time, WMMR was only on FM cable.
Okay.
Nobody knows what that is, Youa.
I don't know.
And or it went to the dorms. And how many people in the dorms at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning were listening to me do my thing?
Yeah.
So I would routinely do giveaways like, all right, I'll take caller 7 right now on whatever the studio line was. And the phone wouldn't ring once. And I'm like, all right, well, this is good practice. And I'm getting to sit here and play music. And I love it. Worked there. And then eventually that turned into Radio K. I auditioned for the morning show. Got that. Okay. So it was Sharon and I doing a show called Morning Breath. Yeah, we liked it too. We liked it. And then I'd been doing that for about 9 months, and I got a call from Kevin Cole, who I knew as a very popular local DJ influencer before the internet. He was the music guy in town, and he was the cool DJ in town, did the raves, Depth Probe, and was First Avenue's like sort of celebrity DJ at the time. He got roped in with some people, the Cargills, and there was money, and suddenly there was a cool radio station. He called me out of the blue one day. I'd never met him. And he said, hey, do you want to do radio? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you want to come and do the morning show? We're launching a radio station. And it didn't seem like the real world to me. Like at the time I had no responsibilities. I was in my young 20s. I was making 25 grand a year, and it was more money than I knew what to do with. And they offered me this job, and I thought, well, okay, but is it really like this? And I knew it wasn't going to be a long-term thing. I just figured, okay, well, we'll do this till we don't do it anymore. And when you're young, you make those kind of decisions, right?
Wait, what did you go to school for at U of M?
The U of M, nothing. I really only went back because the radio bug was always somewhere in the back of my head.
Okay.
And you had to be a student at the U of M in order to work at the radio station. So I was taking extension courses and kind of half going. In my head, I had told myself I was following my minor in Japanese studies. I did. Well, I took Japanese, and I was actually very diligent about it for a little while. But it was such a deeply immersive course. 5 days a week, there was a 1 hour thing where they said hello on their very first day, introduced everyone in the class, and never spoke another word of English again. So you had to be there every day, and you're working with little kids' workbooks and stuff, but you're learning the kanji in a brand new language. Right. And then there was also 2 nights a week, there were these big 2.5 hour English language things to cover what you'd been learning. And so it was a very time-intensive and text-intensive course, and I missed a couple days, and by the time I went back, I was so far behind that I gave up. But that's kind of the story of my academic life. I was smart, but not studious. And but anyway, so I went back there, and I went over, and they offered me a job, and I was so utterly gobsmacked that I could do radio for a living. Okay. They offered me money, and I was not aware that the game worked, that they're going to make an offer that they expect to be far too low. Oh, sure. Then I come back, then we sort of meet somewhere in the middle. They said, we'll give you $17,500. And I said, yes.
17,000 a year?
Yes, 17,500. And this would have been 1993, 94. So again, it was not enough money to be doing what I was doing, but I didn't know, and I didn't have any perspective. And I was literally going to do the thing that I wanted to do for a living at that point more than anything else. And so I decided to ride the wave. But yeah, I took a $8,000 a year pay cut to go from a nonprofit to doing starting in morning radio. But it was the right decision. It was 30 years of a job that I really, really enjoyed. Yeah.
I actually thought about you just the other day because it was raining and I was driving, and I'm like, oh, I should turn on my windshield wipers, because I used to listen to you on Cities 97, and you were on the afternoon show, and you'd always say, turn on your windshield wipers.
Well, turn on your windshield wipers. More importantly, turn on your headlights,
Yes,
because
headlights.
if the rule is...
Oh, sorry, that's what I meant. Turn
Yeah,
on
yeah.
your headlights when you're...
If your windshield wipers are on, your headlights should be on.
It should be on.
If there's inclement weather, and it's startling, in the winter, it's white cars. In a rainstorm, it's slate gray and silver cars that disappear into the road that never have their lights on. It makes me insane. And people are like, well, now they're automatic, and I don't, they just turn on and off on their own. I'm like, there's literally a switch. It's right next to your turn signal. It's right there. Just click it forward or click it back. And so, yes, I do, and still continue to get a little worked up about that. Maybe a little less feisty than I used to.
No, that's what I meant. Turn on your lights if your windshield wipers on.
Because I think it's the state law that if your windshield wipers are on, you have to have your lights on.
You have to.
It makes me crazy.
And I thought of you.
Well, I've left a mark.
You left a mark.
Somehow that makes the mission all worthwhile.
Yeah. So the first time I heard your voice on air, I'm younger than you, obviously.
Yes, you are.
But
I don't know about obviously you are, but yes, you are.
But you were on The Edge, because The Edge was this alternative radio station that I started listening to, and then you migrated over to there before it turned to Cities 97.
The Edge never turned to Cities 97.
93X, sorry.
93X, exactly. So at the time, the whole time I worked at Rev, I was the morning guy there for 3 years. We were the little sort of scrappy DIY punk rock version of alternative radio, whereas The Edge was owned by Disney, ABC. They were the mouse. They were the big evil corporate entity that couldn't be as cool, and they were way too commercial. And so for them, we were never any real threat, but they also didn't like having us around, and they were still very much in that old school mentality of, you're not anybody's friend in radio. We're all competing for the same listener. And so there was a lot of weird back and forth there. So then the telecommunications bill got signed in 96, and suddenly individuals or companies could own as many radio stations or newspaper outlets or TV stations as they want.
So it's a monopoly.
So, well, you saw this basically a land grab, because that had all been broken up with, trust busting. And now you see this massive land grab. So companies like Cumulus, like Clear Channel, like ABC Disney, scoop up all these broadcasting outlets because the margins were so good. And they're like, all right, we're going deep into debt now, literally billions of dollars. And because they thought, well, we're going to make all this back, and tenfold, 100-fold. So that got signed. So once Rev 105 never made a dime, it lost money every year, but they had a very wealthy benefactor in Jim Cargill. And he just got tired of losing money. And after a 3-year run, he sold to ABC Disney. They offered him, more money because stations were going for far higher than market value. He ended up making money on a station that never made him a dime. I mean, there's a reason billionaires are billionaires, right? But as a result, then suddenly Rev is gone. And they had made it to X105. It was this metal station, and they offered to let us stay, and I did, just because I didn't know what I was going to do next. So I wasn't talking at all, but I'm basically a glorified board op at this point. And one day I'm like, I'm going to quit. And they said, the boss there said, well, come in, the totally new administration, said, come and talk to me when you're done with this shift. And they're like, would you ever want to work at the Edge? And now working at Rev was kind of like a radio tree fort, right? It was cool. It was indie. It was underground. It wasn't like the business. It wasn't official, even though it was in retrospect. But to be invited to go work on a 100,000-watt station with all the bells and whistles, all the promotional dollars, huge sales staff, the whole bit, was kind of daunting. And I was excited because I liked doing it. And I was called a sellout, a Judas, a traitor, because I went and worked for the competition.
There's no social media at that time. So
no, but the phone calls and the faxes.
Got it.
And
faxes.
Seriously. Oh no, angry faxes. Really? It sounds cartoonish to say it out loud, but there were many. Just angry. And I'm like, well, I can't sell out of something that's gone. And I did get paid more to go to the Edge, but that's because they paid people what they were their market value. But it's not like I'd abandoned Rev. I loved Rev. But it suddenly went away. The guy, if you're mad at somebody, be mad at the guy who sold it. So I did. I went over to the Edge that summer. They were in the process of shedding staff because they were getting ready to switch over to 93X, which still exists to this day. And so I was suddenly the overnight fill-in guy, then the midday fill-in guy. Then every time they moved off one of their big names, I was the fill-in. And then at the end of that summer of 97, they flipped it over, and then I went on to the 105s for the next 4 years, still working with Steve Nelson. But then that's where Mary Lucia and I, even though we both worked at Rev 105, The only time everyone always says, "Man, I loved your and Mary's morning show at Rev 105." I'm like, that never happened. She worked at night, I worked in the morning. The first time we ever like worked together on the same slot, the same shift was at Zone.
Sure.
It was the year 2000, and we worked for about a year and a half together before once again they decided to flip formats and we got shunted. So yeah, The Edge, that was my first introduction to a lot of people because Rev was very small and had a
Right.
very, very specific selective appeal.
Right. So, what do you feel moving around to so many new spaces has taught you?
Well, I believed this in life before it just got reinforced in radio.
Right.
You don't ever burn any bridges,
Okay.
right? Because now, with 30 years of history, if you're going to be in one market for that time, there's no way you can't get to know everybody.
Right.
And although there's constant turnover, there's a lot of mainstays. There are a lot of other people who have moved companies. The producer and on my podcast and good friend Sean Bernard, we work together at a couple different stations. You get to know everyone. And I don't think it's ever a good look, although, you know, any kind of media is going to have characters, right? And people who are a little abrasive, a
Yes.
little unpredictable. And some of them really drink their own Kool-Aid and believe that
Yeah.
they're stars and this is amazing.
Right.
And even if you're a great entertainer, I don't think it's ever a good look to be a self-obsessed jerk. And so,
Sure.
you know, don't burn any bridges because you may be riding high right now, but that will change. Everything is a cycle in radio and really in life. And you will have downs and you will need to look to other places. You will need to go to work other places. And, you know, if your reputation is that you're a good soldier, you know what you're doing, you're good at your job, and you know to work with people, I think that serves you like, in anything, but radio in particular, because it's such a
Right.
little echo chamber of itself,
Well, and
you
there's
can't
so
burn bridges.
few little people that do work in it. The talent that does work in radio is small.
And only smaller now because that's an industry that's contracting, which is why I haven't been really busting my hump to try to get back into it. The other thing that it's taught me, moving around that much is because sometimes, I'm going to work for a country station and that's fine, but then maybe they want me to put a little twang on the voice or
Yeah.
wear a cowboy hat, or sometimes it requires a different persona
Yeah.
if you're going to adequately sell the product and the brand and the name. I've always had the privilege of being myself. I never had to try to use a certain vernacular or be anything other than how I am in regular day-to-day conversation.
Can I hear your cowboy twang?
I don't have one. Thank God. And luckily I never got offered a job, but I had friends, because I had the privilege, but also kind of a little bit of the curse of working at the coolest radio station ever as my very first radio job. Rev 105 is revered, even though its legend has grown a little bigger than it actually was. But it was great.
Yeah.
But it was cool. But if you start out with the cool kids, then if you go to work for the Edge, you're a sellout.
Yes.
And I just wanted to do this for a living, and I saw an opportunity, and I took it. I have zero regrets about going to the Edge because Rev was gone.
Yeah.
It wasn't. There was nothing I could do about it.
You can't walk up anymore.
And so the same thing. Like if my only gig was a country station, it meant I didn't have to leave town, and I could stay with all my friends and family. I'd go work at a country station, but luckily I never had to, so I never brushed up on that twang, Youa.
One thing that I feel about, because I've had a few different jobs and career changes in my life, I've just learned to hold things with a loose grip. Because I'm like, you know what? I appreciate it while it's here, but it's gone. I have to move on. My mentality has changed. I've changed, and I'm become better at accepting it. And sometimes people will bring it up and you're just like, great, that was a different time in my life.
Yeah, and again, I've loved my time in radio, and I don't miss it at all. But, given the sort of seismic changes that have happened in my life in the last couple of years, from health to relationships to employment to all of that, I wouldn't say that I've had a spiritual awakening, but certain principles and day-to-day attitudes have absolutely moved to the forefront. And one of them is very much, and again, it sounds cliche, and I'm going to say it like a 4-year-old would say it, but the old Ram Dass ideal of be here now. The past is always going to inform you, but there is zero sense in carrying those rocks with you because they're only going to make today heavier. You got to set them down and let them sit there. You can look at them whenever you want, but you can't carry them around. You can't live in that, and it can't define who you are. And tomorrow, you didn't know everything that happened today when you went to bed last night. There's no way.
Right.
Sometimes it's little things, other times it's the craziest day ever. And so you can't live in tomorrow. You really have to live in it right now. And if I'm happy today and I can sleep well tonight and I feel good today, It's the only time there is. You can only live right now. And so it's
Yeah.
that has been something that is both through radio, but a lot of other factors has really moved to the forefront. And I also think that being through some of the challenges I've been through in the last couple of years, I always believed in the golden rule. I'm not a deeply religious guy, but I do, for some reason still, even without the threat of eternal punishment, know that it's the right thing to do to be decent to people.
Yes.
The golden rule. I've always tried to live my life by it, but it's become even more of an important principle. I try to treat everybody exactly the way I would like to be treated. I try to give people what I would like from them. And I think that that serves you more often than it doesn't. There's always going to be jerks. There's always going to be people that take advantage. But that doesn't give you the right to not keep trying. You have to. If you're trying to make your life, the world, whatever, a better version of itself, then it's incumbent on you to do your part of it.
Can I ask about your podcast?
Anything.
Okay, so tell me, how did that get started?
So it's the Brian Oake Show podcast. It started, we're coming up on our 6th anniversary. At the time, I had been fired from The Current. And I was out of radio for a while, and I was cool. I've been fired from stations before, Rev, Zone. That's the nature
This
of the
one
business.
was very public.
Very
No,
public
yeah.
and a little gruesome, and not even vaguely swathed in the truth. But I'm not here to. I've really, again, that's one of those stones I've set down. I can't stay bitter about that. It sucks. Lost my dream job, but being bitter about it today is not going to improve anything about my current situation. So I'm not perfect at it, but I'm getting better at it. But the podcast, my good buddy Sean Bernard, who I'd always gotten along with very well. He has done on-air and radio, but his career is similar to mine in that he's worked a ton of different places, although he moved around more than I did. But his career was predominantly sales-oriented. And so I worked with him at a couple different radio stations. He reached out to me. He had dabbled in podcasting, and after I got fired, he reached out to me. It was a little ways, about the same time that you sent me that lovely needlepoint that you sent me.
I see it in almost every picture that you post. So
Well, it's in my studio. It's in the
yeah.
Smart Start MN studio for the podcast. It's right behind my head because it matters. You sent me that needlepoint that said, never give up on your stupid, stupid dreams at a pretty low ebb for me. So it was very lovely to get that. But Sean reached out to me during that same time, and he said, do you want to do a podcast? And at the time, podcasting was already blowing up. It was
Yes.
already a very crowded space 6 years ago.
So we're already, this one's already a little bit behind.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
but there's no way to go back, and
No.
and so now the difference is now with the volume that's out there, you just have to make sure it's good.
Yes.
It has to be interesting. It has to draw people to it in order to separate itself from the background noise at all. But the Brian Oake Show podcast, he reached out, and at the time, I didn't really, much like when I worked in radio, I barely listened to radio. I do it. And so I'm not one of those guys who's always scouring what the enemy's up to. And so with podcasting, I'm like, well, if I go home or I'm in the car, I listen to talk radio because I like KFAN, even though I'm not a sports guy. And if I'm at home, I put music on. And so I never, ever bothered listening to podcasts. So I'd heard, I think, literally 2 episodes of any podcast ever at that
Sure.
point. And Sean's like, you want to do a podcast? I'm like, sure. I had literally no idea what it entailed. I just knew that it was stuff that I was already given to. I'll be interviewing people. There'll be
Yeah.
music involved. It's going to be great. But I thought it was, this was going to be one of those sort of diversionary things, right? Like it wasn't going to become the main way I earn a living. I just thought we'll give it a shot. And so he's like, well, how many do you want to do? And again, not listening to podcasts, I had no idea because I was coming off of doing radio 5 days a week. So I thought, well, it's going to be like that. And I'm like, but I don't want to do 5 days a week if we're not getting paid.
Right.
So I just threw out 2 a week. Having no context,
Yeah.
no goal, no understanding if people consume it, the content in that rate, what would be a good
Did
number
Sean
to do?
know or have an idea?
He just said, how many do you want to do? Because
Okay.
then he could go approach advertisers.
Sure. Got it. Okay.
And I literally I reached into the dark and pulled out a number. I have no idea. And then, I come to find that some people do a podcast a month or, or there are people who do them daily. And so
Yeah.
then for a while there, as we were kind of getting off the ground and, getting our feet under us and kind of figuring out a rhythm, 2 a week was tricky.
Why was it tricky?
Just because even though I've interviewed hundreds, if not thousands of
Yes.
bands, artists, entrepreneurs, whoever in radio, I always had a producer. I was never the one doing the busy work and making the phone calls and answering the emails and crossing the T's and dotting
Right.
the I's. And And then once you
show
get a
up.
hold of someone who
Yeah.
shows interest, then there's the back and forth of, as I don't need to tell you, but just to
Yes.
tell other people, the back and forth of, where's that? Nail down a time. That day doesn't work. Well, can we do this day? And again, it's not the end of the world, but it can be a lot.
It does take time. Yeah.
It absolutely does. And that was hard for me to get into a rhythm of doing that, which may sound weird because, you're only trying to get 2 a week. But people have busy lives, and I was not used to it. And to be honest, I didn't know if anybody would care, if anybody really wanted to be on my podcast. Because, again, I knew nothing about podcasting. I understood that I was coming off a 30-year radio career. And I actually did go work at Cities again for a couple more years after that started. Yeah, so I didn't know anything about it. So it started because Sean asked, and I said yes. And we had our first main primary sponsor from before the time we recorded our first episode. You have a gorgeous setup here, and I love this room. And our very first one, though, those shared office spaces where you can pay and just show up and work whenever you want. We found one of those that also had a very small, extremely modest recording studio in the back. But in addition to coordinating guests, you had to coordinate with their schedule, other people using that studio. And it just became too much of a nightmare. So we decided to, it's not the most lavish production facility, but the Smart Start MN studio suits our needs perfectly. It's completely our own. And I think that changed both Sean and I's attitude once we decided, well, we're going to start paying rent to have a place to do this thing. It sharpened our focus, both of us. And when Sean came on early on, he's like, you should just hire me and not make me a part of the organization. I should just be an outside consultant or a contractor, And I'm like, no, because I don't like to do taxes. I don't want to deal with sales. I don't want to deal with that. It's just I'm not good at it. But there are things that come with doing a podcast that I am good at. And I thought, well, and I don't want to just have him sort of be involved if we're going to do this. And I need someone with his acumen and his skill set, which I totally do. I want him to have some skin in the game. And so we got the LLC together, and we're the co-owners of the podcast and anything else that might pop up under that umbrella. But so we got it off the ground, and we just did episode 526 yesterday, and we are rapidly approaching 6 years of doing it.
Was the intention to always have Sean kind of be like a co-host?
I think so. I don't like to monologue. The reason that it's an interview-based podcast is I prefer conversation. I want to sit down and talk. That's the best way to get information. It's also the best way to occasionally generate a laugh or find an unexpectedly poignant moment. And that's why I make all the guests who come on pick out the 3 songs we're going to feature, because that to me is another entree into someone's personality. It deepens the conversation, the understanding of each other. I'm way past thinking any songs are good or bad anymore. I know what I like, but if somebody else feels the exact opposite, they're right too. So it's a good way to learn about somebody and also have fun, and there's a little break in the talking. And so I think, the podcast appeals to the music fans and the people who like the guests that we have on. But in those in-between times and the way we kick off the show, I absolutely want Sean to be a co-host. Not full-blown. I don't want, obviously he's not going to talk as much as I am. It's my name on the podcast, all right? But I would hate it if he was an absolutely silent partner, because I don't want to just sit there and monologue. It's more interesting, I think, for people to listen to 2 people talking than one, unless that person is a gifted orator, which I might have a deep voice, but I promise you, if it was just me talking, it would get old quickly.
I love Sean too. He's
great.
He brings different elements to the show.
And that's important. My voice gets heard a lot, and my opinions get heard a lot. So we try to have varied guests. But yeah, you're exactly right. Sean is not the same person as me. We see eye to eye on a lot of things, but he looks at life from a very different angle than I do. We all learn, right? We all are better with perspective on things that we don't maybe have a full grasp on, or suddenly are looking at things in a way we hadn't considered them or looked at them before. I love having a different voice on there. And it also helps that he's a really, really good individual. A great guy, an impossibly loyal friend. And he's great. I love working with him. I never dread having to see him.
Well, that's a good thing.
Well, when you go to work, sometimes you're like,
I know.
So-and-so's going to be there.
Yes.
And I don't ever feel that way about Sean.
I feel you don't realize how hard it is to find loyal friends or people who have integrity or who can show up every time.
I tested a lot of friendships of mine, most of my relationships actually in the last couple of years. And I got to say, I must have done a good job picking before, because almost everybody stuck with me.
So during this time that you're doing your podcast, you ran into some health issues.
I did.
Can you share what your diagnosis was and what also triggered it to be like, something's weird today? And you're like, I should go get that checked out.
Well, I knew something had been wrong for a long time, but it hadn't started to present itself in such a way that it was interfering with my life chronically or drastically. I was a heavy drinker, and I was always really good at it. Too good at it because I could drink a lot and never got a hangover. Well, I found the thing that I could drink, and it was Irish whiskey.
Sure.
I always drank it neat, so I never had to worry if there was no ice. I don't care. If there's nothing to mix it with, I don't care. I drink it neat. And kind of like drinking black coffee, there'll always be black coffee.
Yes.
Anyway, but I got good at it. I like the taste of it, and it became part of I am in a quiet room with just you and me and a couple of microphones. I feel like I can say anything.
Sure.
I've never been comfortable around people. I'm a shy dude. I'm a little anxious.
That's so interesting to me.
Well, and I think but I think you'll find a lot of people who do what I've done for a living are in that boat.
Okay.
But you get into a small room and you don't know, are there 5 people listening? Are there 100,000 people listening? There's no way to know. So you can just kind of do it and wing it. And liquor always sort of helped me, because there's a lot of social things, Oak on the Water and all these things I did over the years. And again, I wouldn't get hammered, but 2 or 3 drinks into you kind of loosens up your shoulders and a little easier to make all that small talk. And I'm not blaming that. That was just one of the places where I found myself drinking. So I drank too much. I drank way too much, and my body was starting to break down. I was getting jaundiced. It was becoming evident to everyone, and I knew it was a problem. But of course, I'm a dude who doesn't go to the doctor, and I don't admit it's a problem until I literally have no choice. I started to swell up because my body was filling with this liquid called ascites that if you have cancer or liver disease, you get bloated. They poke you with a needle and drain you.
Oh, wow.
So it started to get really bad, and I was getting dizzy. I wasn't myself. I couldn't put thoughts together. I had this incredibly tight, giant bloat on my belly and my abdomen. And I was just living with it. And one day I was coming down the stairs and hit the floor hard, and I tripped on the stairs, and I could barely get myself back up off the ground. And I went out and got in my car. Probably should have had someone drive me. I went out and got in my car and drove myself to the emergency room. And that was last November, so coming up on a year ago. And I then spent the next 6 months not doing any work.
How did that feel?
Not working.
Yeah.
I got to be honest, I was so out of my mind. Somehow things had decayed so far that I wasn't putting 2 and 2 together. I wasn't thinking cohesively or cogently. I hadn't quite pickled my brain. It wasn't ruined, but I had something called HE, which fogs all your basic cognitive functions, twists some of them around, replaces some with other ones. So I didn't really know how to feel about anything. I knew I was very sick. I was in and out of the hospital a few times. I was going to medical procedures and screenings 2 to 3 times a week. I was in such bad physical shape that I lost over 70 pounds. After being bloated, then it started to go the other direction because cirrhosis is a muscle wasting disease. So cirrhosis of the liver. The shorter version of the story is that I quit drinking. I went on an incredibly strict diet, and I laid low, and I was trying to get all the sleep I could. And I came back, and not everybody gets to come back, depending on how much damage you've done to yourself or your body's, how much will it has to do it. And I just always sort of kept this naive, it's going to be okay. If I do the right thing, it's going to be okay. But I had teams of doctors, incredibly loyal friends and family who stood there with me during literally the darkest moments of my life. And they didn't turn their back on me. Every one of them I owe, this current attitude to. My life has changed. It's done a 180. I'm not making any money. I am broke right now, but I don't know that I've ever had anything closer to what you would call, and this is very uncharacteristic, a sunny disposition. I feel so good about life right now, but I had to go through a really dark spot. So I got diagnosed with cirrhosis, and it changed my life entirely. I quit all working, didn't even do the podcast for a while. Sean was great, stepped in, took care of it, got guest hosts, and then just slowly but surely crawled my way back out. And while I was doing that, one of the many procedures that was being done to me, because I had really mucked up my insides pretty bad with the liquor, I had a colonoscopy, and they found cancer. But it was stage 1. They got it out. And so far, with all the marker tests and blood labs I've done, everything seems cool. So, the back-to-back cirrhosis and cancer diagnosis, has sort of snapped me awake, like, I mean, because I've drank all my whole life.
But you'd been sober for a while before the
I
cirrhosis.
quit in 2020, and I went to treatment, actually.
Got it. Okay.
Came out, and that lasted, I don't remember exactly, 6 to 8 months, and then I was drinking again. But then I entered the darkest phase of my drinking, which is why it got so bad, and that I wasn't advertising that I wasn't drinking, or I wasn't advertising that I was back to drinking, but I was totally back to drinking. So then you throw hiding it on top of bad alcoholism, and that's never going to end well for anybody ever. So, and I'm not a big AA advocate. I'm not really a big fan of theirs, but I like some of their attitudes. Okay. The bottom line is you're not going to quit drinking or quit doing any substance or anything harmful to yourself until you're actually ready. Because I'm not going to meetings. I'm not doing anything like that. But I just passed 11 months of sobriety, and I haven't gotten a twinge once in that entire time to drink, because I've been informed directly from specialists that if I go back to drinking, there's a 0% chance I'll be alive in 3 years' time, and probably much less than that. And it's a really hideous, painful way to die. Yeah. That's a powerful motivator, right? And plus, the other thing, too, though, is by doing the things, following the plan, listening to the doctors, going to every single appointment. For once in my life, exhibiting the discipline to stay to a strict diet, to drink the right amount of water, to do all these things that I just never, ever, ever bothered to. I've got a better headspace right now than I've had in so long, Youa. I feel really good about being alive right now.
Good.
And I always did. I liked my life. Things were enjoyable, but there is a shine on things now that it took me being pretty screwed up to be able to find.
So what should we listen to when we're with our bodies then? And why are you open about this kind of stuff?
Well, I went through it all, and I'm not on a crusade. I'm not trying to tell anybody how to live their life, because until you come to the realization, you will not know.
And it has to come from you.
It does.
All these people telling you is not going to matter until you say, I'm going to make that choice.
Well, I still smoke cigarettes, and I'm smart enough to know that will kill me. And every person I see, especially in this day and age, says, you got to quit. And I know the day will come that I quit. But until I am happy with it, I'll go back to being the guy who's hiding smokes or sneaking them or smoking other people's cigarettes. And that's not quitting smoking. And that's the thing I found about drinking. So when it comes to listening to your body, I don't have anything deep or insightful. All I know is that, and again, shocker, it's only been in every nutrition book I've ever read my entire life, even though the guidelines change. If you're eating right, even getting modest exercise, drinking enough water. The great thing is, make that how you normally live your life. You can still go out and down an entire deep dish pizza if you want. Just don't do it every day. You can go out and have a half dozen cocktails and see your favorite band in the world. Just don't do it every day, And it's super simple, but mine has been moderation, making sure that I eat 4 full servings of vegetables every day. And if you think you're acting like an idiot about something, you are.
You probably are,
You're well past the point of acting like it. So just don't. I just listen. And, for all those things, I put off getting a colonoscopy for way too long.
Okay.
Now they've moved it down to 45. Some people are saying 40.
Oh, no, that's me then.
Well, I hate to break it to you. All I can say is that nobody likes the idea of a colonoscopy, right? But they knock you out.
Yeah.
You don't experience any of it. Get your colonoscopies. Go to your regular physicals. Have them draw blood at least once a year just to check your basic numbers. Yeah. Because the earlier you find any of this stuff, the better your prognosis will be.
A funny thing is the person who made the panels here is Luke Anderson. He's a drummer in the band Rogue Valley. And his partner is Linnea Moen. And she is the person that you watch in the videos of the colonoscopy. Like, this is what you do.
Really?
So a mutual friend of ours, Lissy, who was a musician, posted about it because, like, Luke drums in her band too. And she's like, here's Linnea. So I was like, oh.
Wow. Yeah. We're talking Linnea Moen, who used to be Coach Said Not To, yeah? Yeah, okay.
So that's funny, too, to see, like, all these people in different, like, aspects of your life. You're like, hey, you showed up in a different way.
Yeah, exactly.
In my colonoscopy video.
In my colonoscopy instructional video.
Yes. Okay, so what is it about this area, this space that draws you to the Twin Cities? Because I know you've voiced many times that you want to move to the West Coast.
So that's a great point. Yeah. Oregon is where I was actually born. I was born in Portland, but
Oh, I
my
didn't know
parents
that.
moved
Okay.
here when I was 2.
Okay. They
And so
took you out of the element, yeah.
I've really only ever known it well, but then they brought me back every year because my
Oh,
dad's
sure.
family's out there, mom's family's here. So our summer vacation every year was 2 weeks in Oregon, and it just got in my blood. I love it out there so much.
Is it the weather? Is it
It is.
Okay.
And like right now, my parents are out there on the
Sure.
coast, and it's dark and it's gray and it's wet. And like the weather we're having right now in the Twin Cities, we're past the fun part of
Yeah.
fall and now into the grit your teeth and bear it till winter kind of
Yes.
part of fall. It's my favorite time of
Yeah.
year. I love this.
I call dry January just the time where I'm trying to fight the dry skin.
Mm-hmm.
That's my dry January.
Yeah, no, and Oregon also has everything you could ever want if you like to be outdoors, and I
Yeah.
do. It's got mountains, it's got ocean, it's got sand dunes, proper desert, it's got the deepest, most primordial forest you've ever been in. It's got some cool cities. I love it out there. But you asked me about here, and the only reason I've never moved to Oregon is I am a homebody. I crave the familiar. I am not a high adventurer. And I grew up here, and being an outdoors guy, I grew up camping, going to the Boundary Waters, being outdoors all the time, canoeing, and this is the dream location for that sort of thing. Also, all my dearest friends and family are here. And the whole notion of, well, why do you love it here? Why do you stay here has come up a few times over the years, because I did look at jobs in other markets in radio, and that's really more the norm than the exception. You go where the gig is. And I'm glad push never came to shove, because I think I love Minnesota more than I even loved radio. And I mean, if I needed to eat, I would go take the gig.
Yes.
But if I can stay living in Minnesota, I don't know if I'm ever going to leave. I like to visit Chicago, LA. I'm okay with New York, but I could never live in any of those places. I like the size of this pond that we're in right here. Minnesota probably has the most dynamic demarcation between seasons around the year.
Yes.
And I like all 4 seasons. And I think there's something healthy and good for your mentality to go through all those. The ebullience of summer,
Yeah.
the thoughtful reconsideration of fall, the dark, desolate nature of winter. There's not a time of the year that I'm afraid of or don't like, except the ultra hot summer.
I know.
Dinosaur weather, like when the dew point's up that high, I can't breathe and I get sweaty. I hate it. I live in the city. I live in South Minneapolis, and the roads are canopied with trees, like something out of an elven village or something. We live in one of the most beautiful urban areas in the entire country, so that's fantastic, and I love being in the heart of that. Contrary to popular belief, it's more of an idyllic Eden than it is a burning hell that many people would have you believe.
I mean, that's just Minneapolis, not St. Paul, though.
Exactly. St. Paul's free of those kinds of problems. But then the culture, the richness of the culture here is often lost on people from the coasts. I still think there is an impression that Minnesota is flyover country, when in fact, whether you're into dance, whether you're into reading, whether you're certainly into music, whatever you might be into from a cultural perspective, great art houses and art galleries, instruction in the arts. If that part of our culture matters to you, you'll find places with much greater diversity, your New Yorks and your LAs. But as far as cohesion and I think accessibility to those worlds, I don't know if there's a parallel for the Twin Cities. I love it here. Yeah.
I'm gonna give you a little bit of chance to brag.
Oh my.
Who has been your favorite interview in terms of famous people?
The vast majority, like 98.9% of them, have been incredible. Most people who are successful in any sphere in life are good communicators. And even if they're not in the mood to sit down and talk with you, if their job demands it for 10 minutes and it's going to get their song played on the radio, they're going to give you a great 10 minutes. Now, not everybody.
Yeah.
There are jerks, but most of them have been amazing. And it's always been my favorite part of my job. I like the talking part, but sitting down and finding out what makes bands tick and what went into this album or why they decided to do this thing over here, that's always been, and really with the shape my podcast has taken on. Let's see some of the great ones. Brandy Carlisle in Studio C. Now the ones I'm going to pick for you here are the Studio C ones, where we would have anywhere between 30 to 80 people in this small performance space at Cities 97. Oh man, I'm trying to think. There was
She was open and vulnerable, or why was she a great interview?
Who's that?
Brandy.
She was. She was very sweet, very kind. She was very involved, like a good interview. They're looking at you and paying attention. They're trying to actually answer your question, right? And she was engaged, but also there are a handful of performers out there who are more than just a singer with a guitar, right? Brandy Carlisle is a sorceress. Her gifts as not only a songwriter, but then as a storyteller and someone who can weave that together so beautifully with simple and powerful music or complex and powerful music. There are just few people whose weave is as deep and as strong and as powerful. And I just remember sitting there, you know, because I'm interviewing her, so I'm sitting 10 feet away right in front of the crowd. And I remember not having anything to say after she finished one of her songs. And it was so good. There was a 2, 3, 4 second beat from the audience. Like nobody could really believe that we just watched that. And boom. And then the applause erupted and everything. But she casts a spell. She's not like a regular performer. And there have been all kinds of great ones. Over the years, a lot of my peers in radio, they want to be buds. So they're stopping in the green room and doing their Snapchat and whatever. And that's never been my thing. You know, we both have a job to do there. I want to be cordial. I want to get along. And if we're pals, we're pals. Great. But I kind of hit it off with Matt Nathanson years ago. And he and I became pretty good friends, actually. So that was fun.
He's a charmer.
Oh my.
Yeah.
He's so funny and he's so smart. And for whatever reason, well, you know how it is. No matter what you do for a living, occasionally you meet those people where what they say is interesting, what you're saying is interesting to them. You make each other laugh, and it just sort of happens without effort, right? No artifice. It's just, oh, we get along. And it doesn't happen often enough in this world, but when it does, it's wonderful. He's a total charmer. Sheryl Crow is great. You know, it's weird because I am a professional and I've always been professional and I don't harbor any weird illusions. But every once in a while, no matter what you do, every once in a while you crush out on someone. And in the 90s, the first time I interviewed her, I crushed out pretty hard on Sarah McLachlan.
And she's coming back to town.
I know. And I was smitten. I already liked her music.
Yeah.
But
was this Cities 97?
No, this would have been earlier. This would have been back when I was still working with Steve Nelson at Zone 105.
Okay.
She was at Northrop, and we went over there, and in one of the offices or schoolrooms or classrooms adjacent to it is where we did the interview. And she was just lovely and charming, and I went to the show, and I love her music so much. Then didn't see her again for 20 years, and when they did the Lilith Fair reunion, she came through Cities. She was just the coolest.
Did she remember you?
Yeah, no.
That's okay. I just didn't. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they
trust me. This was all in my head. Yep. I don't think that she was smitten either. But no, she was still wonderful, and 2 decades of success, and the history of Lilith Fair, her getting an OBE from the Queen, you know. But she was still down to earth. She walked into the green room. One of my favorite stories of any time in radio. So I'm enamored of her, and we're not doing a crowd in Studio C because she's got somewhere to be. So she's just coming in. She's going to do the performance. We'll record it and play it back later. She walks into the green room. I point her in. She does not look sideways. She takes her purse off and throws it on the table next to her and makes an actual beeline to the Galaga and Miss Pac-Man machine that's in the back of the green room. And she starts playing Miss Pac-Man. And she's playing, and I'm like, all right, well, I'll be back in a bit. We go and get everything set up in Studio C. I come back, and I'm like, all right, Sarah, I think we're good. She's like, all right, just about done here. I walk away. I don't want to crowd her. She's obviously having a moment playing Miss Pac-Man. And then I finally came and I went and talked to our sound guy. And he's like, we kind of got to get going here. So I went back in, and, you know, by now she's been playing for more than 20 minutes. Yeah. And I didn't know if she'd started new games or what. She's like, no, I'll be right there. And I've been on that end of it, right? Where you're like, I'm not finishing. I'm doing really good right now. She is apparently a Miss Pac-Man super pro. She got the high score that stood there for 5 years until some other band came along and broke it years later. So she was very charming, and I loved that one a lot. You know, I've interviewed the guys in REM. Ryan Adams, I was terrified to interview because he had a reputation for being this wild card, and at the time he was drinking and, you know, attacking fans that were saying rude things in the audience. And I'm like, why did he even agree to do this? I thought but he, unbeknownst to me, had recently gotten sober. He turned out to be one of the most delightful people I've ever had the chance to interview.
He was on your Brian Oake show.
Yeah, no, not on the podcast, but on Cities 97.
Got it.
Okay. Yeah. The radio, obviously, because of label involvement, you have a lot more access to much, much bigger names. I get names that I absolutely adore for the podcast right now. Just had Greg Norton of Husker Du fame in to talk about the big new 4-disc box set that's coming out of the Numero Group based on one show in First Avenue's main room back in 1985.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I reviewed the Grant Hart show that he did at the Hook and Ladder. It was his last show, and that was a very emotional show, but they weren't going to announce that he had cancer at that time. I didn't know much about Husker Du. It was one of my favorite pieces I wrote because it was more about the people there than it was about the history of it, too. I'm capturing a time and space more than I am like, okay, here's a history of this band that you probably already know about. So.
Grant was a very, very lovable dude. He's a complex character to say the very least, but he was so talented. And, Husker Du literally changed my life. Growing up, I went into a record store, Northern Lights, when I was 16 years old, coming down from Coon Rapids. Coming down once a month or so, me and my cool alternative buddies would come down and go to Schindler's and buy comic books, and we go to Northern Lights to buy records. And I walked in. I looked like something out of a John Hughes movie, like an extra character, an NPC in the background somewhere. Trench coat, silly new wave haircut, clearly suburban punk rock or new wave kid. And I walk into the coolest record store in the state, and I asked the guy behind the counter, I'm like, what's good? And this would have been a classic opportunity to be classic record store guy and just make me buy something totally ridiculous and stupid. But this guy walked me over to, he's like, we just got this in, and this is the best record in this store right now. And it was Husker Du's Zen Arcade, which has more than stood the test of time now, more than 40 years ago. And it was, it changed everything for me. I didn't have any context. It cracked everything open that I thought I knew about music. I'd never heard anything like it and fell in love with it. And I already liked loud guitars like Cream and Hendrix, but this was a whole new world because it was all the angst of hardcore, but there was all the emo of emo. There was all, and these great melodies in there. And Grant, getting back to your point there, Grant had the more pop sensibility, but delightfully so. He was a very nuanced individual, except when he wasn't. He was great.
Okay, so you talk a little bit about your celebrity. I thought it was interesting because I was talking to somebody today, and you had come to speak at an event that I hosted years ago at my day job. It was a web agency, and we had these happy hours, but it was OUR, like we owned it, happy hour.
Right.
And I asked you to come, and you came. And your friend Jason Nagel, they had a fundraiser that same night at the Turf, so you had to run off. And my colleague asked me, he's like, how did you get Brian Oake to come? I'm like, I don't know. I just asked him and he came. But there's this concept of you and then the real you, and how close are they? And has that gotten smaller over the years at margin?
Because I only ever get this front row seat that I have for me. So I don't really know what the rest of the world thinks. Okay. I've always been a little self-conscious in general, a little self-deprecating, both in a jokey way, but also in a genuine way. And so I used to be genuinely embarrassed, couldn't take a compliment, didn't like the attention, any of it.
You are a true Minnesotan, even though you're from Portland. But...
Oh, I'm Minnesotan. Everything I know is Minnesotan. And I don't like that. That's why radio is perfect, because then you have this benefit of having some influence and having a voice. But really, my job is to sit in a small 5x5 gray room and talk into this one microphone. And that's my job. And, so the going out and the socializing part of it, I've met people who could give a rip that I'm Brian Oake, and I meet people that are too nervous to come up and say hi to me. Okay. That is not common. Neither of those are common. Most people just like, oh, that's the guy on the radio. Cool. And if they like listening to it, or they like hearing me show up on KFAN to talk about music or whatever, that's the one I get these days.
I used to hear you too on the Dave Ryan in the Morning Show.
Oh, yeah.
It was funny because
we're in the same hallway. There were 5 radio stations right there.
Well, it was funny because I'd read comments. They'd post on their social media, Brian Oake's on the show today, and all these women would be like, the sexiest voice.
And see now, so that's I wish that my life had more of that in it, but no, that was never a day-to-day thing. But
Yeah.
I remember that every time I'd go on KDWB, and then they would take calls sometimes, and
Yes.
I've got a woman a third my age calling me Zaddy, and I'm like, yeah, no, and again, I know it's all in fun and everything, but that's so not who my radio persona or
and
personal
that's their
persona
audience
ever
too.
was.
You know, it's like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, they like that kind of stuff.
Yep.
They stir the pot. It's garnered me a lot of respect. It got me out of a speeding ticket once, being Brian Oake. Here's the thing about it. I don't mind a bit of notoriety or celebrity. And again, we're using these terms really relatively.
Right.
It's not like it's difficult for me to walk down the street or anything like that.
You're not Brad Pitt.
No, I am not. Not even close. But I don't mind the notoriety. But I've never been the person who is, do you know who I am? And I never enter a situation expecting someone to know who I am. And for a while there, when it started to really peak, and I'd been on the radio for 10 years, and my voice or my name was around a bit, people at least had heard of me. I'd go to a party even with dear friends, and they wouldn't just introduce me as Brian. They'd be like, hey, this is Brian Oake, from Cities. and again, I saw what they were trying to do, and it was, but I'm like, I've always wanted to win or lose a situation based on my own merits, Okay. So if I show up at an event like that, or I'm introducing a band, that's Brian Oake, right? But that's not what my life is like 99.9% of the time. Sure. And, even in a scenario like this, I'm just happy to be here. I've never thought I'm a bigger deal or less of a deal than anybody else. And that's never a good look on anybody, right? I can't quantify where that gap was and where it is now, because I don't really know what people think about me. I think probably like most people, other people's opinion of you is a pretty scattered bag, right? I mean, there's a lot of variance in there. Yeah, and I never really drank my own Kool-Aid. I was just happy to be doing what I was doing for a living.
Okay, so last question for you.
Oh.
What do you want people to see when they see you?
It's a big one. I guess I'd like people to see someone who does his best, doesn't always succeed, but does his best to be honest to the things he believes in, Like, I don't wear music like a badge. I don't have a huge collection of vinyl to be like, look at my cool vinyl. I genuinely care. I'm a true believer.
Yes.
I do love it. And there's something about the ceremony of vinyl. We don't get to pick what we love, right? It's in your head. And so all that's genuine. So I guess I'd like people to see someone who is not trying to give in to artifice or manipulation. I think I really am who I am. And I'd like them to see someone who is probably no more, no less flawed than anybody else out there. But we also come to our flaws in different ways and deal with them in different ways. And as long as I'm moving in the right direction towards being a better me, treating people around me better, treating the world better, that's who I would want people to see. At least that's what I'm trying to express. Handsome, aging, 57-year-old Irish-American white male.
Yes.
Cisgendered. I don't know what people see, and I think that's one of our frustrations in life, right? I mean, you'll never know, even though you and I are sitting here and talking and we get along well and we enjoy each other's company, you're never really going to know 100% what I think about you, and I'll never know 100% what you think about me. So I try not to get into that trap, because again, you can tell when people are desperate for people to like them, and that just sounds exhausting,
Yeah.
So if people like me, wonderful. Let's get together. We'll hang out. We'll talk.
Yeah.
And if not, then let's just move on, because there's lots of other things to do. Yeah.
It's been a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Youa.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Between Two Urns is hosted by me, Youa Vang. Technical support and editing is provided by Chris Koza. Our theme song, Swaying Trees, is written by Chris Koza. Between Two Urns is made possible by a grant from the Harlan Boss Foundation. For more information about Ramsey County Historical Society, please visit www.rchs.com. Thanks for listening.